Well, hi and welcome to Coffee with Phil. Welcome to this podcast where we drink coffee. And in this series, this limited series, I'm speaking about transition, about the journey from there to over there, from where you are to where God is leading you. In this series of 8 episodes, we're going to talk about transition, sensing the new thing, seeing the new thing, how to manage fear, definitely want to stop opening closed doors, and the art of waiting well. Join me on this journey as we drink coffee and talk about transition. Well, good afternoon and welcome to the podcast. That's right, it's my afternoon. I'm not sure what you're up to today, where you're listening from, whether you're driving in the car, whether you're listening in your AirPods, or even which country you're in. Noticing quite an uptake of the podcast on the YouTube channel that we post it to. And I'm not sure if that's residents in New Zealand, where I'm hanging out, or whether that's some of our friends overseas who like to use the captions and Google Translate. So thanks to YouTube for supporting the expansion of our podcast. I find I listen to most of my audio podcasts in Spotify. It's kind of just where I hang out, I guess. I can stream them in my car or to device of choice. But I wonder what you're up to, I do notice that I'm consuming more content on YouTube. So I might grab a coffee in the afternoon. On the weekend, I might sit down and just watch some sports highlights. Or, you get down this rabbit trail and suddenly, the other day I ended up watching a couple of videos on how to build an invisible door, internal, like hidden doors, with paneling and all sorts of other paraphernalia. So it's amazing what you can get caught up in. Of course, I hope you're drinking good coffee wherever you are. I just had my afternoon coffee and really good, obviously. I love the afternoon coffee, a little bit of milk. It's a flat white in a small cup, and it's just gorgeous. Hey, we're tracking in this series, and I realise probably only got 2 more to go in the series on transition. So Coffee with Phil, episode 108. And I set about at the beginning of the year to have a series of short topics, so a bunch of them, and I suppose we're calling each one a series. This one's got 8 episodes in it, and it's on transition. And the reason why I'm doing this is because me and plenty of others, I'm just really sensing that we're in a transition moment, a time frame. It's a season of God where He is elevating people, escalating the advancement of change, and that requires us to transition. And I must say, I've really enjoyed the conversation because what I've discovered as I've reflected on my journey is that I've learned a lot, and I want to speak about that today a little bit, but also we can learn a lot from each other. And I am speaking to plenty of people at the moment that are in the midst of change, going through change, or if not currently, they're about to, or they're contemplating it, or they're not sure about it. So that's a real challenge, and I guess, it's not surprising to me that God's really stirring me in this way to be able to support people in transition. And today, episode 108, the title of this episode, as you may well have seen on your podcast platform of choice, is Change is Constant. So I went to the interweb, and I thought, I wonder where that came from. And a quick search on the interweb introduced me to a philosopher from Ephesus in 6 BC, and his name's Heraclitus. And I couldn't find a photo of him, but he is the one who said change is the only constant in life. And so many other wannabe philosophers, myself included, have often quoted him and possibly even misquoted him. The only thing that's constant in life is change. So change is the one thing we can count on. That would be another way to say it. Perhaps not so reliable, that statement, but here's another one that I found from our new friend, the philosopher of Ephesus, Heraclitus. He says this, you cannot step into the same river twice. And I had to ponder that and then delve further into my investigations. And his point in saying this is you step into the river once, and of course, there it is. The river is made you wet. But if you were to then step in it again, it'd be different water, wouldn't it? Because the river is moving and the water has long since passed, and what you're stepping into is a different environment, even though you might be in the same location. And that has a sense of a prophetic edge to it, but I'm just going to leave that to you to understand. So today I want to talk about what's the deal with change. Why is it such a challenge, and what challenges does it present to us? How do we respond to those challenges? I want to see what we want to learn, because you know me, I like to introduce a Bible story for all of our benefit, myself included. And then what I'm going to finish with today is I'm going to unpack and hopefully explore a little bit the 5 key strategies to manage constant change. See, there's only one way you can avoid change, and that is to bury yourself. And by that I mean fully bury yourself. Because if you just put your head in the sand, then you won't see the change that's happening around you, but it won't stop it changing. Will it? No, it will not. It will keep changing, because change is constant. And even if you ignore it, if you're not aware of it, or you're ambivalent to the world around you, change is still happening. And I've got to confess, Kathy and I are like that at the moment. Someone was telling us on the weekend, they say, oh, well, you might have seen on the news, blah, blah, blah. And we're like, actually, no, to be honest, we stopped watching the news years ago. And they kind of looked at me like we're a bit odd. And we didn't get into it. But the reason is we were watching the news through the lockdown season of the COVID melodrama. And quite frankly, I just found that the news was escalating the drama, misreporting the facts, and quite frankly, it was just a pain in the neck and only made me angry. And the more I watched the news in other contexts, the more I realized actually all the news is like that. And it wasn't that I was subscribing to any conspiracy of any kind. I'm not even saying that that's what the media was doing. I'm just saying it was just annoying. It was bad reporting, bad questions. It seemed to have bias, and so we don't watch it. Now, the reality is now that Kathy and I don't really know much about what's happening in the world, except that which others tell us about. And so I'm ambivalent to it. I really don't know. Now, does it affect me? Of course it does. The election and the Trump circumstances, I will call them that. The Trump situation in America has an effect on the country that I live in, even though I'm halfway around the world. The weather patterns and the shifting economic climate, they all have an effect on me. But I'm not exactly going to change them, am I? So whilst I'm ambivalent to what's happening, it's constantly changing around me and it affects me. So even if my head is buried in the sand, my bum gets battered by the weather. There's a lovely picture for you. So let's deal with this. Let's talk about what's the deal with constant change. And when I say change, I want you to know that I'm speaking about physical change. So that's the environment around us. That's things around us. It could be even your body's going through a period of change. It's emotional. So change hits us emotionally. And I'll talk a little bit about that. Change hits us relationally. You know, people come, people go, people die. People get introduced into our world. All these things are relational change. And then, of course, spiritual. Every single one of us, whether we're aware of it or not, we are a spiritual being. And that means we're on a spiritual journey and things change around us. We are in a battle, not against flesh and blood, but against the spiritual forces that seek to destroy us. We have to go on a journey of the Spirit, with the Spirit, and the level of engagement that we bring into that journey will necessitate certain forms of change. So we've got physical, emotional, relational, and spiritual. And here are 6 things that really hit us in all these areas, in the physical, emotional, relational, and spiritual. And the first one, which we absolutely saw in the pandemic drama, and that was fear of the unknown. We absolutely didn't know what was happening, and it caused fear in a lot of people. Now, fear is false evidence appearing real. I've said to you before that fear is faith in the wrong thing, but fear is real. And how we deal with it is is going to affect every aspect of our lives. But the truth is, the reason why we react to change is fear of the unknown. We just don't know what's around the corner. The second thing that affects us, and this was absolutely evident in the COVID pandemic, was loss of control. Control was literally taken out of our hands, and we didn't have a choice about it. We were put into lockdown. We were told when we were allowed to walk and where we're allowed to walk, how far we're allowed to go. And if you were in, I have friends in Melbourne, they were in lockdown for, I think, the longest time, 200 and something days, and they're restricted to their neighbourhood. They were completely out of control in what they were able to do and not do. And that's going to affect you. It's going to affect you emotionally. Clearly, it affects you physically if you're stuck inside or stuck in a neighbourhood. And then relational, you can't see your family, and spiritual, you've got a whole lot of fear to wrestle with. The third thing that really affects us in the reality of constant change is a risk of failure. When we're presented with a situation where it's unknown and out of our control, there's a high likelihood we're going to bump into things that we just do not understand or can't comprehend or have never dealt with before. Like classic example, I've said this before, but as a church leader, we were flung into a situation where we didn't know what we were allowed to do, what we weren't allowed to do, or how we were going to do things. We didn't know how to connect with people. We didn't know how to make sure people were safe. We had to learn how to live stream from home overnight with limited access to technology and or support. And for some of us that are like to embrace technology, it was okay. For others that don't have anything except a phone, it was quite challenging. And so there was a huge fear of the risk of failure that was just a reality that was right in front of us. So risk of failure was number 3. Number 4 that upsets us, most of us, is the disruption of routine. Our pattern of life, our rhythm of life, the cadence with which we operate was completely disrupted. And so I'll give you some examples. I've got friends who are workaholics, and they just worked really hard, but they got frustrated and they wrestled with themselves because they couldn't go to meetings. They couldn't move at the speed they wanted to because quite simply everybody just slowed down. You didn't have the same accessibility. Even though you were quote unquote working from home, you're in your pajamas, you're making coffee in the morning, you're having a lie down with the dog in the afternoon sun. Routines were completely upset. And some bosses tried to maintain those routines. It's like, oh, we're having team check-in at 8 o'clock every morning. Oh, maybe we won't. So routine was disestablished. Others I know at the far extreme, like I talked to some church leaders after the first lockdown, and they're like, it was amazing. I didn't have to do anything. I just checked in online every day to make sure that people could see that I was alive, and I had a Facebook post, and then I just read books, and I went for walks as I was allowed to, and I had quite a leisurely time. And I looked at a friend of mine, and we both said, well, we didn't realize that was an option. We were reinventing ourselves, and we were lifting ourselves, and I missed the opportunity to have an 8-week holiday. I was shocked at that. How silly of me. Anyway, the disruption of routine is one thing that really, really challenges us. And number 5 was absolutely real in COVID, and that's fear of loss. When change comes, it brings with it a risk that something will be taken away. Obviously, sickness is a good example of that, and the fear of the death of loved ones or oneself even. That was real in COVID. I did not lose someone fatally to COVID, but I know people that did, and it was very, very real for them from experience. I can tell you that fear of loss. You move to a different city, for instance, and you're afraid of disconnection and broken relationships and what that's going to mean, and will I lose my close connection with my family? It's a fear of loss, and it has an impact on us emotionally and relationally and spiritually, which then flows into physical manifestation of those kinds of challenges. So we've got fear of the unknown, we've got loss of control, we've got risk of failure, we've got disruption of routine, we've got fear of loss. And the fifth one and the last one, oh my gosh, this hit me hard, I can tell you, in COVID. Overload that leads to fatigue. Now, I've recognized this, and I will talk about that near the end, I guess, but I've recognized a pattern in this. So firstly, in COVID, every time we made a decision as leaders, we felt like we were doing the best we could for the people we were serving, and then the whole landscape would change, like new rules would come out, or suddenly group sizes and limits on group sizes was enforced, or geographic, like my dad was in Tauranga, about an hour and a half away from here. He's dying from cancer, and I was restricted in how I could visit him and when I could visit him, and there was a whole lot of decisions that need to be made and connection with others that need to be made, and I got what I call decision fatigue. I had the same thing going on through COVID. I had a building project that was absolutely catastrophic, required all sorts of decisions under pressure because of some scandalous service. But the whole point is that the overload literally led me to a place of fatigue. And when you're fatigued and you're not pouring back in, then that is a recipe for disaster. And yet people still look at you for those decisions that you're just sick and tired of making. So this is the deal with constant change. And I guess if I could just park myself here for a minute and say, on the back end of COVID and all the fallout that happened, some people just reacted or separated themselves or made significant decisions to shift their lives. It resulted in even more change. And sometimes the best thing you can do when you're in overwhelm like that is sit down under a tree, suck your thumb, and decide not to move for 10 minutes or maybe 10 weeks. And I'm not being silly, I'm actually being serious. Sometimes what we need to do is not so much check out of life, but remove ourselves from the pace of life. And so I have this exercise that I do quite frequently now where I remove myself from the busyness and the pace of my life that I've created, that I'm trying to sustain. And it's like I get off the treadmill and I just sit there for a while and I watch what's happening. Not necessarily intent on changing the world, but making sure that I rest myself for what's next. So if you're feeling an overwhelm, if you're feeling really overwhelmed by the change that's going on around you, sometimes the best thing you can do is just to take time out. What would happen if you took 2 weeks and you went and sat somewhere completely different? I've talked about my ability to go to visit the lake and sit there and look at the birds in the trees or watch the boats on the water. The reason I do that is because if I stay at home, that rest doesn't come, because the environment is my natural surroundings. There's always jobs to do. People know how to find me. And sometimes you just feel lazy if you sit in your own house doing nothing for 2 weeks. So I have found there's a huge benefit in physical relocation for those sorts of things. And it doesn't need to cost you a lot of money either. When I started doing this, and in fact, to some extent, what I do now is I take a box of food and a bag of books, and I take my technology, but I choose what my boundaries are around that. I choose who I talk to in that season of rest. And so what I'm saying is sometimes when you're overwhelmed by change, which is constant, you cannot avoid it, but you can certainly sit it out for a short period of time. Oh, look, I know other people that are checking out of life completely. And Kathy and I have this joke about that sometimes the attraction of going and living in a tropical location, the other day we were going for a walk and we had a chat, and I said, well, why don't we just go to Bali? Live in a cheap house in Bali, the weather's warm, and we can just be digital nomads. We can write books, create digital content, and really just check out of the circulation. And that, my friends, is called escapism, and it's not actually healthy if you do that in the wrong way. So anyway, I suppose I'm just acknowledging just the frenetic pace of life for a lot of us, and the inability to deal with it. So the whole point of this podcast, this episode, Change is constant. We shouldn't avoid it. We can't avoid it unless we check out a life, and therefore how we're going to manage it. And I just want to make an observation here in the middle. I want to talk about a Bible character that I absolutely love. I've spoken about him a lot in my circle, I suppose, of traveling and speaking. I love the story of Joseph, but it is a significant example of someone who dealt with a lot of change in the season of their life. And you know, we've got a young boy who starts off, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, at least 8 stages of change. And then beyond that, you know, he's got family, and then the death of his father, and a whole lot of shifts going on there. So the shifting sand of his life meant that he had a lot of change. And so at the beginning, I said this in my notes. So I'm looking at my notes here. Joseph, for instance, to start with, he had the hope of prophetic dreams. So he was the dreamer. God showed him the dreams of the future, and he knew that he was on a pathway to an amazing future because God had shown him these things, and there was hope that came with it. And you could tell from the story he's really excited about it. You can also tell from the story his brothers aren't that excited. They despised him. They hated him. They wanted to get rid of him. And so the second stage of God and Joseph's story is betrayal and loss. He literally was left for dead, and his father was told that he was dead. There's blood on his jacket. He must have been attacked by animals. We're so sorry, Dad. Jacob, he's dead. Joseph is gone. And of course, that betrayal just led to a loss of hope, really, in Joseph. The third thing that happened to him after that, he wasn't killed, but he was sold as a slave. So some slave traders, in those days they were traveling, they'd pick up waifs and strays and the homeless, and they would own them as slaves and sell them to wealthy people. And so Joseph was sold into slavery. He began his life of slavery in the house of Potiphar. He was a paid employee. He was well regarded, but he was still a slave. He was owned. He was not a free man. And imagine what that's like to go from a wealthy family with hope of prophetic promises into a life of slavery where you are owned, you are someone else's. You know, you've got a brand on you. You're owned. And then the fourth thing that happened in the life of Joseph was there was this false accusation with Potiphar's wife. She got a bit frisky. He didn't want to play games with her, and so she accused him of things he never did, and he was thrown into prison. So he's a slave that gets chucked into prison. He's now in bondage for something he didn't do, and he's a long, long, long way away from the promise. But imagine the shift from that. So he's living in Jacob's house in the beginning of the story. He's got food and wine and family and lots of freedom with the wealth they had and the farming life they had. And now he's a prisoner. You know, so he's got a roof over his head, but he's confined and he's controlled. The fifth stage I see change here is Joseph finds favor in the prison with the chief of the prisoners, but also with the other prisoners inside. They learn that he can interpret dreams because God has got favor on Joseph, and so in prison he actually experiences favor and usefulness. So he's not limited by his environment, but certainly can't go anywhere, but he can certainly be useful. And there must have been an interesting phase of his life to understand, well, I believe the dreams God gave me. I can't see them coming to reality. I've got no hope of life ever changing. I'm a prisoner. But while I'm here, I can still be useful. One of those friends promised to take care of him and remember him before the Pharaoh. And it was the baker. No, it wasn't. The baker died. He got killed. But the cupbearer, the guy that tastes the wine of the king, he said, I'll remember you. And he forgot. 2 years, they reckon. 2 years, he forgot. So Joseph's helped this guy out of prison by interpreting dreams and setting him up for the hand of God to be on his life, and then he gets forgotten. What kind of change would that be? You know, you've got this elevation of hope, and then it's taken away again. He's let down by those that he's helped. Then ultimately, the cupbearer does remember, and Pharaoh needs Joseph's skills in dream interpretation, and so he is instantly elevated. I say that he went from prisoner to prime minister in one day. He's elevated to power. Pharaoh says, "There shall be none in the land save for me that holds the power that you hold." And he gave him this signet ring of authority. And what a significant change that would have been. They shaved him and dressed him, and suddenly he's living in the palace. He's riding in the chariot of Pharaoh, and everyone bows to him. What talk about a drastic change. That's like a whiplash moment, as my daughter would say. And then ultimately at the end of the story, there's a season there of reconciliation and forgiveness with his family who betrayed him and sold him to slavery. That is like a roller coaster. If you take a moment to go and find your Bible this week and start at Genesis 37, and then in 39 right through to chapter 50, there's this story of Joseph and his journey in his life, and it's a fascinating thing. But I suppose what I'm really challenging you and me to do is to ask ourselves, what can we learn from the story of Joseph? Like, which one of those could you relate to, and should you relate to, and why does God want you to relate to it? So I've been giving you questions all along the way, and so this question is helpful. Okay, Lord, in this story, what would you like me to notice? And, mentors of mine, and by that I just mean people that I choose to listen to, that may not know personally, but they say read the Bible until something is highlighted in your mind or in your spirit. Recognize that as the prompting of the Holy Spirit, and pause and read it and read it and read over it. And as you do that, you're saying, okay, God, I feel like you're asking me to notice this verse or this section or this aspect of the story. What else would you like me to notice? Is there something you'd like to teach me? And as a result of that, God will begin to teach you from the story of Joseph the things that he'd like you to see. So that was a bit of a monster task, to be honest with you, and Joseph has a lot to teach us. So I hope and pray that he does teach you some great things. I want to make this useful, and I'm going to try and do this in 5 or 10 minutes, to conclude the episode, recognizing that we can't stop change. Change is constant. Change is going to affect us, and I gave you half a dozen ways that affects you physically, emotionally, racially, and spiritually. There's all sorts of reasons and effects there. But what I wanted to give you is 5 key strategies to manage constant change. Now, what you're not doing, to be honest with you, is you're not managing the change. You're managing yourself. Like people say, oh, I'd like to learn some time management skills. No, you can't manage time. Time ticks. Time passes. But what you can do is you can manage yourself in the midst of time to make yourself more effective in the time that you have in front of you. And it's the same with change. Guys, you're not going to manage change unless you have the ability to physically manipulate or control your circumstances. Well, you might regulate the change that comes at you by shutting the world out or slowing things down or restricting certain things that have input in your life. So in some ways you can regulate it. But I think the better way to think about it is to say change is constant, and what I can do is I can manage myself in the face of change to be a better person through the change. So let's just go with that, shall we? And I've got 5 key strategies here, and I want to talk about them and share some stories as we go, because I want to make this about faith, faith made real, and faith made applicable for each one of us. So number 1, the 5 key strategies to manage yourself in the face of constant change. Number 1, change is an opportunity for growth. If you go back into the podcast in 2023, some of the early episodes around episode 30 through 40 and 50, in that kind of season. So go back and look through the list. You'll hear me talk about a lot of learning, and I'm quoting books, and it's on how to deal with a depletion of personal resources, how to manage burnout or circumstances in your life that drag the life out of you, and how do you come back as a leader. And I'd say to you that I had an opportunity there to basically cut myself off and avoid the situation and change life that way. But what I decided to do was to sit in the situation, work through the situation, and become a better person as best I could, despite the circumstance, but because of the change. And so this is a mindset, and I guess the truth is you've got to choose to have that mindset. I'm certainly not trying to puff myself up and say, look how awesome I am, because I completely want to honor the way the Holy Spirit led me, nurtured me, cared for me, and supported me in the midst of that season of my life. But I literally had to say to myself, I want to grow. I set my mindset to grow, and then I developed in my disposition an attitude to grow. So I would be reviewing things. I'd be learning about my feelings. I'd be learning about what my body was doing in response to the significant barrage of change that I'd been through. And I chose not to take it as a threat so much as an opportunity to grow. So I was always learning, I was opening new books, I was asking God to speak to me through my circumstance, to help me through forgiveness and communication, and so it was really just a internal deep dive. And then it was also about the resilience that comes from that. Because in the learning, I suppose I was realizing that, it's a cliche, but what doesn't kill you makes you grow stronger. It's literally true. If you've got a mindset of growth, personal growth, and becoming a better person, it actually builds resilience, and it helps you to stand a little bit taller, but also to be able to face future challenges in a much, much better way. So the first strategy is have a mindset that this is an opportunity for growth. The second strategy, I look, if I want a heading, I guess it's around communication. And so what should we call this? Well, let's say communicate well. The second strategy is communicate well. And that means don't put your head in the sand. Don't hide. Don't avoid. But learn to have conversations. And so I would say keep short accounts. Most importantly, keep short accounts with loved ones. Never, ever, 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 ever let the divisive nature of silence split you and your spouse, or you and your children, or you and your loved ones. Keep short accounts. Come back and say, hey, that didn't go well. Can we start again? Can we try again? Listen more than you talk, but don't be afraid to talk. When Kathy and I were newly married, it took me a while to learn this, but she's not naturally a talker. She doesn't externalize her thinking, she internalizes it. So I had to learn to give her space to listen, space to think, but then she had to learn that it was important that she does talk. I want to hear her voice. I want to hear her thoughts. I want to be in conversation. So that was a learning for us. It was a growth, but it was all about communication. So listen more than you talk, but don't avoid talking. And that's going to mean that you've got an open, transparent, honest conversation that's frequent. You've got information. You can process the change. So yesterday, Kathy and I were driving home in the car, and she said, look, there's change in front of us, and I know we should be talking about it, but I just don't know which parts of it we should talk about. And it was just a really cool statement, because it was acknowledging the need for communication, and that even if we're talking, we're making progress, even if there aren't decisions being made. So communicate well, I think, is the key thing I'd say there. And that all leads to trust. And so number 3 is I'm going to come back to this. I have said this so many times to you in the last year or so. Trusting in small circles. I think what we need in transition to help us to manage change is a safe, small circle of close people. Don't get advice from everyone you talk to. Don't open up your world to 75 different loads of people that you want to get their views on. That's not going to help you. Have a trusting circle of people that are close to you, that love you and respect you, and are willing to love you in a practical way. You know, we have a saying in leadership, sometimes to be kind is to be cruel, or to be silent is to be cruel. And what we mean by that is sometimes honesty is the best thing. You've got to be honest, and it takes a lot of trust and a lot of love and a lot of grace and a lot of relational capital to be able to say to someone, hey, look, what you're saying is stupid. You're hurting yourself, you're beating yourself up, and I need you to shift your mindset. And I'm saying this because I love you. And you know, the opposite of that is when you're going, oh, no, you'll be right, you'll be okay, you'll work it out eventually. Like, that's not helpful, that's not kind. Now, read the room, read the situation. I'm not saying be a blatantly sort of blunt, confrontational person all the time, but again, in line with communication, build a trusting circle. And I talked to you about this years ago, or no, yeah, it was 2 years ago now, really. I was talking about this really tight circle, and there was a book that I was reading that said, you know, you've got to have the right kind of advisors in the circle. And I made a decision to take some people out of that circle that weren't helping. And again, just understand what I'm saying here. I'm not trying to be judgmental. What I'm trying to do is help you to build a circle of safety by having a circle of trust. So that's number 3. Number 4, I'd be investing in growth. And that was really number 1, but it's more than that. It's investing in what you need so that you can grow. You know, sometimes you've got to equip yourself with the tools that will give you the skills. So what, number 1 that I gave you was the mindset for growth. But number 4 is actually about investing in what you need to grow. And so it could be, like these days, it could be just as simple as an exercise app that you pay for, or a gym membership that you go to the gym. That's part of your mental well-being. It could be like I've invested a lot in books and programs to take on board the learning that I think is necessary for me to be able to manage the change that's constant in my life. That I can be a better leader, I can be a better husband, I can be a better father, that I can be a better person because I've learned how to change those things that weren't helping me. So I like to ask God this question as well. What do I need to learn in this change? What do you want me to let go of? What do you want me to do more of? What do you want me to do less of? But also I would add to that, and that is, what do I need to learn to be more adaptable? One of the reasons that we don't deal with change is because we become rigid. We lock our feet and we say we're not moving. It's who I am. You can't expect me to change. I'm not going anywhere. And we become so rigid that we don't flex. So I suppose what I would be saying is, what do I need to grow? What do I need to learn? What do I need to invest so that I can be adaptable? And by adaptable, it means that we can flex in the situation to respond to the situation. Just looking at my notes here, it's about having the skills and tools needed to navigate the process. So, you know, change is constant. It means things are moving. What it means is you need to move as things move, but it's about navigating that. You know, don't think of life as a storm where you stand still and everything smashes around you. You got to go with the flow. Think of it like you're in a river or even a whitewater kind of river raft, and you got to navigate what's going on around you. You've got to go with the flow, because if you don't make life happen, then it's just going to happen to you. So key thing is, what do I need to learn in this journey to become adaptable, to flex with the situation? And how do I navigate change? It's a different way to think. And so that's just continual improvement in order to become a stronger, better person as a result of the journey. And remember, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So as I close, I want to spend a little bit talking about the last one, which has really become quite important, and it was just never on my grid. And the fifth key strategy, and perhaps the most important of all of these, is to prioritize your well-being. Prioritize your well-being, your personal well-being, your emotional health, your spiritual health, your physical health, and your relational health. So right at the beginning, I was saying, what's the big deal with this change? And I said, oh, look, your life can be hit in these different ways. You've got to prioritize your well-being in your physical life. You've got to prioritize your well-being in your emotional life. You've got to prioritize your well-being in your relational life. And you've got to prioritize your well-being in your spiritual life. How do you do that? Well, obviously, with your physical well-being, you need to understand your body. Your body's sending you signals, so deal with it. What is it sending you? If it's sending you SOS messages, for goodness sake, do something about it. What's your weight like? What's your sleep like? What's your tiredness like? Are you always sick, unwell? Your body is sending you signals, and so get the memo. Understand and obviously change it, because when I say prioritize your well-being, it means you need to prioritize being well. So change your health. Prioritize your well-being and emotional. So I used to disregard this, and so I had to go on a huge journey of understanding what it meant to be focused on emotional well-being and to have an attitude that I could do something about it. Emotions are not weakness. Emotions are a gift from God that He uses to help us understand ourselves better. So that was a huge thing for me, and a lot of my personal development was around that because I had to prioritize emotional well-being. Now, if I've got several nights a week where I'm out in different board meetings, because they often happen, between 4 and 8, to make sure the professional, those of us working can access them. I've got to understand, I've got to prioritize my emotional well-being. So I've got to have some space to myself. I've got to have some rest time in the afternoon so that I can mentally and emotionally prepare myself for the environment that I'm walking into and to be my best self in that space. So I've got to prioritize my well-being. It means cutting stuff out of my schedule and managing expectations and being willing to sit in the chair for an hour with a cup of tea in the afternoon and read something on my iPad, watch something on YouTube, or just watch the clouds go by. About scheduling time out and having time up the mountain with the Lord, having time, special time just to worship God. That's a key priority in my life. It never used to be. To prioritize well-being relationally means to make room for people. And so if you don't know who your closest friends are, and if you haven't prioritized spending time with them, slap yourself silly and then go and do something about it. Prioritize your relational well-being. We are relational creatures. It's why the Bible says we should not neglect the coming together for worship. We should be doing that with other folks. The Sabbath in the Jewish mindset was around family and food and wine and laughter and sharing that goodness of God with other people that we care about. That's your relational well-being. And finally, spiritual well-being. If you're not focused on this, then again, encourage yourself to do something about it. What can I do to grow spiritually? How do I have a personal relationship with Jesus that's a friendship rather than a religion? And maybe I'll talk about that another time, because that's a biggie, that one. In fact, as I'm thinking about it, it's huge. It's like more than one episode. But spiritual well-being. Focus on your spiritual well-being. And look, because I'm awesome, I'm just going to give you a bonus here. In the midst of change, try and find a way to put little fixed routine moments inside your change. So in COVID, Kathy and I would have a routine where I would have my morning coffee and reading, and then we'd go for a walk. And we like to do it in the morning so that we didn't miss it at the end of the day. But for us, it was a fixed routine moment in the midst of significant change. And so I've found just to have little patterns that I like to honor as a routine to meet physical needs or personal needs, but to do that in the midst of change. So like if I'm going through a whole bunch of change at work, then I like to go and meet with someone that's constant. It reminds me of my past or my safety or fills my love tank. So So that's a bonus. And I suppose it's part of prioritizing your well-being. It's a sub-point of that is to include fixed routine moments as best you can. Oh my gosh, there's just so much going on. I just love spending this time with you, and I hope this is helpful. I hope that it's helping you to navigate change, because change is constant. Change is the only constant in life, according to Heraclitus of Ephesus, our friend. And I encourage you to do change well. And I look forward to being with you in the next episode of Coffee with Phil, where we talk about transition. Until then, God bless.